Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got another combo that we haven't tried yet, and it's one that I'm really curious to see how it performs because it definitely has a chance to be a really nice turkey shell, even though it's not necessarily a do-all type of shell, but a shell that you can use with both waterfowl and turkey. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what we can get out of it. But as for the shells I brought out here today, they're not in a fancy package, but these are some Salt Creek 2 3/4 inch 1 1/4 ounce payload of bismuth number 4s, moving about 1250 feet per second. And here's what one of those shells looks like out of the package. They are a buffered load with a nice wad in there as well. And pretty much Keith over at Salt Creek said these could be a pretty decent duck load, or they could be a pretty decent performing turkey shell as well. So run them through a few different kinds of combinations and see what we can get out of them. And so far they've looked pretty good for a typical small duck bismuth type of shell as for patterns, but we haven't tried them through a turkey setup yet. So that's what we're out here today to do, and to see what their pretty standard load of bismuth 4s can actually do for a turkey shell. And as for the setup I've brought to run them through today, I got out the Mossberg 835 Ulti-Mag, but I threw in the Carlson's ported 675 turkey choke. Now the reason I went with the 835 is because for whatever reason, it typically seems to really like the bismuth 4s. I think pretty much every bismuth number 4 shell we've put through it has performed really well. And this Carlson's ported 675 also did really well a couple weeks ago when we first tested it, so I figured this will be a pretty interesting combination to try out with these shells. So as for today's test, everything's going to be set up the same as usual. I've got the turkey paper at 40 yards with the chronograph as well, so we can get our velocity from the shell. So I guess let's get you guys a view of this target and we'll take the shot and just see what these Salt Creek bismuth 4s can do for an actual turkey shell. They should look pretty decently as long as they get along with the 835 and the Carlson's ported choke, which I think they will. So let's go over here and take our shot and see what kind of pattern we get. Alright, so that shell gave us 1374 through the chrono. Now the package claim is 1250, so we are obviously above that, but typically, from what I can remember, we are low to mid 1300s is what we've been seeing out of these shells. So 1374 isn't too far out of the realm of reality, and I do believe that's probably correct, based on how this shell sounded. But I will say, these are pretty nice in the recoil department. They're definitely not an absolute hammer on the shoulder like some waterfowl and turkey shells are. So they are pretty nice to shoot if we got a good pattern down there. So let's head down to that 40-yard paper and see what they were able to give us. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard target, and this is what we got. Now, we absolutely do have a dead bird here. There's one through the brain and several more down the spine that would have absolutely taken that bird down. Now, the pattern might be just a touch off to the right, but as we can see, it is much more of a broad and open pattern than it is a super tight core hot turkey pattern. Now, that's not totally unsurprising for what these shells are and how they're loaded either, since they are kind of a mix between a turkey shell and a waterfowl type of shell that can float somewhere in the middle. And we know these are good. We've seen great waterfowl patterns out of them, but I was curious to see what they could do for a turkey. And looking at this pattern, I think we could afford to go down in constriction just a little bit still. This is plenty good enough for a 40-yard turkey pattern. It's gonna get the job done. But I think we still have room to condense some of these little strings and flyers around the edges here. Now, for our core that we have right around that turkey's head there on that paper, it is beautifully even. I mean, you can see that 10-inch circle right there around that bird's head. There is really no voids or anything in there whatsoever. It looks really nice through our core. It's not super tight, but it is very even. It's just these edges that string out just a little bit that I would like to see condensed. Now, these are a 4-shot in a 2 3/4 shell, so we don't have a ridiculously high pellet count to work with, and 4s can be a little tricky sometimes to get the pattern the way you want them to. So this is not a terrible start whatsoever for what this shell is through a turkey choke. I think we definitely have some room to condense this down a little bit and get a little bit better of a pattern out of it if we were to turkey hunt with it. So at the end of the day here, I wouldn't say that it's anything groundbreaking, but it's definitely not terrible either. It is more than usable enough, especially if you wanted or preferred a little bit more leeway in your patterns and a little bit less hot of a core area like some of these turkey shells can give you. I mean, that is absolutely going to get it done without a question to 40 yards. So now I'm definitely curious to see what this shell will do if we tighten the constriction down a little bit, because I still think we can get a little bit more out of it as a turkey shell as well. Okay, and here's the wad from that shell, and it really doesn't look bad at all. It looks very much normal. It is one of these large two-piece or two-petal type of varieties, but there's no holes, there's no tears, no snags, nothing stuck down in there, and it all looks very nice and perfectly normal. But you can tell that this is probably not your typical turkey-style wad that you would see in a lot of turkey loads, so that just also shows as to how these are a little bit of an in-between shell where you can kind of use them for both turkey or waterfowl, depending on what you're looking for. But for the wad itself, looks perfectly fine through that ported 675. So I have no concerns of going down a little bit farther in constriction with how this looks. And I think we might be able to squeeze a little bit better pattern out of it too with a little more constriction. But for the wad, looks perfectly fine. Alright, y'all. Well, what did you think about that performance right there? It's definitely not the tightest or the hottest turkey pattern we've ever gotten by a long shot, but hey, that is more than good enough to get the job done to 40 yards. You really wouldn't need anything better than that. Now, do I think we can squeeze a little more out of these with a little more constriction and the right choke combination? Yeah, definitely. We know Salt Creek makes some good shells, and we know these shells have been good performers in the waterfowl world that we've tested them in so far, and this was just a start for a turkey pattern here, just to see what they could actually do. Clearly, we have a good enough shell to be a turkey load as well if we needed it to be. So if nothing else, this was a good starting point, and now we can go from here as well and try these through some different combinations and see what they like. But I guess leave all your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Is that a plenty good enough pattern for you, or would you want it condensed down just a little bit more, especially around the edges? And is there another choke setup or combination that you might want to see these shells run through? Let me know all that down below. At the end of the day here, I would say this is a pretty good middle of the road, middle ground starting point for us. It's nothing absolutely fantastic, amazing, but it's definitely not terrible either, that's for sure. And it shows a lot of promise that we can tune that in a little bit better. So we're just going to have to try it through some other combos and see what it actually gives us. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.